So now we just raise both sides to the third power. Okay. So that would give us m to the 1/3 power to the third power equals 2 to the third power. Oh, let me kind of draw a little separator here. And this one would give us m to the 1/3 power to the third power equals negative 1/2 to the third power. Okay, so these two will cancel each other out. So you end up with m equals 2 to the third power. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And this one, these two will cancel out. So you end up with m equals negative 1/2 times negative 1/2 times negative 1/2 is actually negative 1/8. And that's just because negative 1/2 times negative 1/2 times negative 1/2. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. Negative and negative is positive. That positive times a negative is negative. All right, so any questions on that one? Leave that up for a few seconds. All right. Okay, so let's say for our next example, actually forgot to give a situation. What if your exponent is negative? Okay, so let's say, for example, if you run across one where you want to solve 15 times a to the negative 2 power minus 8 times a to the negative 1 power plus 1 equals 0. Excuse me. Okay, so you can leave it like that if you want to, but first thing I would do is, we know that since a to the negative 2 power equals 1 over a squared, we can rewrite it. Okay, so we can make that 15 times 1 over a, oh, well, 1 over a squared. Well, you can do it that way too. Just increase this a little bit. So that's 1 over a squared. And clean that a up a little bit. There we go. Okay, minus 8. Instead of a to the negative 1 power, we can make that 1 over a plus 1 equals 0. Okay, so just like before, we temporarily replace 1 over a with, say, x or y or whatever you want to, with y. I just use y out of habit. Okay. So if we replace it with y, we end up with 15 times y squared. Oh, don't need the parentheses here. 15 times y squared minus 8 times y plus 1 equals 0. Alright, so once again, you can solve it using the A times C method, quadratic formula. It doesn't specify a specific method, so you can pick any one. Usually when it doesn't specify one, I just pick the quadratic formula. Okay. So we know here that A equals 15, B equals -8, and your C equals 1. Okay, so we know that y is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, which is equal to, our -b is -15 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is -8 squared, minus 4 times a times c, which is times 15, times 1, all over 2a, which is 2 times 15. Okay, so that gives us -15 plus or minus -8 times -8 is positive 64. 4 times 15 is 2 times 15 is 30, so that would be 60 all over 30. That y there. So we end up with y equals -15 plus or minus square root of 4 over 30. Okay. So if we just go ahead and separate it, that means that y is equal to -15 plus 2 over 30, or y equals -15 minus 2 over 30. There you get, which one did I mess up on?
Shouldn't it be b the square root of x? Shouldn't it be 15?
Oh, I put 15. Okay, why did I do that? Okay, I see what you're saying. Thank you. I know, once you write down that first mistake, it just follows you all the way down. Okay, so that would be -8. So that would make these positive. Okay, so that would become 8, and that would become 8, and that will become 8. Yeah, that negative will disappear, and that will become 8. Okay, so this gives us y equals 8 plus 2 is 10 over 30, which simplifies to 1/3. And y equals 8 minus 2 is 6 over 30, which simplifies to 1/5. Okay, so we know that y equals 1/3. We separate that. And y equals 1/5. Let's bring this up some. Okay, just like before, we replace our y with whatever we replaced it with in the first place, and that's our 1 over a. Replace y with 1 over a, not the other way around. replace y with 1 over a. Okay, so this gives us 1 over a equals 1/3. And this gives us 1 over a equals 1/5. So you can cross multiply if you like, or you can just multiply this side by 3 and this side by a. But you end up with, if you did decide to cross multiply, a times 1 is a, 3 times 1 is 3, a times 1 is a, 5 times 1 is 5. All right, so any questions on that one? All right. Okay, so let's say if we have one like this. So let's say if we want to solve x minus 9 square root of x plus 20 equals 0. Okay, so I'm going to point out a little bit of a pattern. This way you don't have to try and figure out what to do with that first one. If you notice for, let me see if I can find it. Not that one, not that one. Ah, here we go. If you notice for the first example we did, this middle term here, you just made that middle term squared your first term. So this middle term here, you made this middle term squared, that was your first term. So that's all you did, you replaced that with y. So here, this middle term squared was your first term. Remember, you replaced, when you did that, you just made the middle term squared equal that. Same thing here. 1 over a, and this is just 1 over a squared. So that's what you replace your y with, that, whatever that middle term is. Okay, so with this one, if you notice your middle term is square root of x, well, not solve, but simplify. Okay, so first thing you want to notice here, that x is going to equal that middle term squared. So that would be square root of x squared. All right. So that means all you have to do is rewrite that, and you can do the same process over again. So I'll give you a few minutes to start on that one. Alright, so for this one, we figured out that our x is square root of x squared. So we just go ahead and rewrite it. So you have square root of x squared minus 9 square root of x plus 20 equals 0. Okay. So just like before, we temporarily replace square root of x with y. Okay. So this now gives us, instead of square root of x squared, y squared. Instead of minus 9 square root of x, minus 9y plus 20 equals 0. Okay. And this one, since you don't have anything in front of the y squared, you can see if the basic factoring will work. We have two numbers that multiply to equal your c, which is 20. And those same two numbers have to add to equal your b, which is negative 9. Okay. So in this case, negative 5 and negative 4 should work. So negative 5 times negative 4 is positive 20. And negative 5 plus negative 4 is negative 9. Okay. So this gets replaced with y minus 5 times y minus 4 equals 0. Okay. So if we set both of those factors to 0, y minus 5 can equal 0, or y minus 4 can equal 0. If we add 5 to both sides, y can equal 5, or adding 4 to both sides, y can equal 4. Okay. So now we have to just replace our y with our square root of x. Oh, sorry. Didn't know it was that low. Okay, so this now becomes square root of x equals 5. And this becomes square root of x equals 4. So you just square both sides. So you have square root of x squared equals 5 squared. Square root of x squared equals 4 squared. Okay, so the x and the square, not the x, the square and the square root cancels out. So you have x equals 25, or square and the square root cancels out here, x equals 16. So, feel free to let me know if I have to raise it up. All right, so any questions on that one? Okay. Okay, so now we're going to solve basically story problems with quadratic equations. Okay, so quadratic equations and problem solving. All right, so let's say, for example, a cliff diver jumps from a platform. Okay. So the platform is 144 feet above the sea. Okay, so if we forget about things like air resistance or stuff like that, the height, actually write out height first. The height, which we'll just call h, in feet, let me see, of the cliff diver, above the, well, is in feet. Actually, I rewrote that. I mixed up my sentences. The height is in feet. Where the cliff diver. There we go. Skip the sentence. I'll just bring them together. Cliff diver. Is after t seconds. Is given by the equation h equals negative 16t squared plus 144. Okay, so how long does it take for the diver to hit the ocean? Alright, so the first thing I usually do is I draw a little picture to help me kind of visualize it. So let's say if you have, this is your cliff. Okay, so this is your cliff, or your platform, whichever way you want to call it. That's your diver. And we know he's 144 feet in the air. And at some point he's going to, let's say this is the sea. So from where the sea is to where the diver is 144 feet. So at some point he's going to jump off and hit the sea. We just want to know exactly how much time it's going to take him. Okay, so if he jumps off, where he is actually given, let's say this is his height. Let's say this is the time. So at whatever seconds, we'll be able to figure out how long it'll take him to hit the ground. Okay, I mean not hit the ground, hit the sea. That was grim. All right, so we know that he's 144 feet above the sea. The height would actually equal 0 when he hits the sea. Because if he started off at the 144, that's his height above the sea. When he actually dives into the water, he's at height equals 0. Okay, so that means h equals negative 16 t squared plus 144 becomes 0 equals negative 16 t squared plus 144. Okay, so now we just solve for t, because that tells us exactly what the time is when he hits the water.